and I'm kind of excited about this particular presentation because I've heard it before, and I want to see how people react to it. And Mary-Jo, I've worked with her now for, I don't know, about 2 years off and on, here and there. And we're involved in a couple of other things, like the issue of funding for long-term care, those types of issues. And I heard her do this, and it's very different from the way I think. Mary-Jo has a different sort of thought process than I do. So I wanted to make sure that we addressed all the thought processes that you can have. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Mary-Jo Fetterly and the formula for aging well. Mary-Jo, you can take over.
Awesome. Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, great. We've actually known each other for almost 20 years too, because
Yeah.
Duncan was one of the people that I saw when I was first injured. And I'm like, I want to be a quad like that. He was doing everything for himself. He was incredibly independent and working for GF Strong at the time. And it just was it was a good thing for me to see, as we all know, the peer um, effect is really real, and it was really important for me, Duncan. So thank you. And physical activity was one of the things that really hit me at that time. It was like, he's doing that. Why can't I do that? Even at the time I was told I probably couldn't. So I think the place I'd like to start is, let's remember everybody's name here. And how many of you can remember everybody's name? So just giving your brain that kind of challenge to do these simple little things every day, all day long, as you age, will help you to age well. And I'm going to get into more detail about that. So Ross, Lynn, Carrie, Duncan, Peter, and there's one other person I'm forgetting. So that's kind of an example. So we're going to kind of get into a bit of that right now. So although that's not the way Duncan thinks, it's the way that I guess I've kind of developed my thinking over the years. And part of it is what we're going to talk a little bit about is the actual research on brains themselves and what they know about aging and aging well. So I'm going to move the slide up. And so we, in kind of the circles that talk about aging and talk about brain health, have kind of looked at brain health, both as, yes, Duncan said, we all think differently, and that's really important and good, which relates to the fact that we have two hemispheres in our brain. We'll get into that in a minute. But the formula that we're going to look at for the overall elixirs of anti-aging and kind of being, able to age with well-being and all of your capacities as much as possible is really actually a formulaic thing. It's based on research and science. And there's nothing woo-woo about this. It's actually, now that we have fMRIs and various different ways to map brain health and sort of brain biological and physiological function, we can see that these are really important things that we all could do right now and ideally preventatively, before you even hit the 50-year mark. But, it's all there for us. And the real great thing about this formula is that it gives you choice, and it also helps in prevention. So those are really, I think, great things. That maybe, if you could think about it this way, it puts the ball in your court and it empowers you to be able to do the preventative thing and age perhaps with a little bit more grace and longevity. So there's this curious thing, and I don't know if the first picture is like all these bright colors and various different things on the screen, and that visual look at the world is an interesting thing to take in, because all of those colors are kind of all the ways the brain also functions. Now we're limited to a very small area of the brain, and the visual cortex isn't actually as limited as the cognitive cortex, and I'm not going to get into that because I am not a brain scientist. But what we do know is that these two people over on the right of your screen are over, 100 or 100, 98.5 plus. And they both have aged very well because they live in what's called a blue zone. And when the scientists looked at the blue zones, which are kind of these areas on the map, they did a lot of research. They did longitudinal as well as qualitative research and quantitative research. And what they discovered is that the people that age well, and this means having, a good life, like still being physically able to do what you need to do, even if it means you're limited to a wheelchair. Being able to mentally and cognitively um, be robust in your day, and have the ability to not have mood swings to the degree that you might have if your brain is degenerating. To be able to make wise decisions both around your diet or your lifestyle, and just to ameliorate things like emotional upsets or changes in plans, so, which are all kind of relating to the area of stress. So these areas are where these 9 elixirs happen all the time, in a predominant way for the people that live there and that age well into their 90s and past that. So our 9 anti-degenerative elixirs are, and we kind of think of these in the bigger umbrella of prevention and preparation. And it would not surprise many of us, I'm sure, that that first one on the list, which is why I thanked Duncan earlier, is that physical activity is kind of top of that list. And so the more you can be active, and this doesn't mean becoming a triathlete or starting to go to the gym necessarily. It just means 20 minutes of really good movement where ideally you can increase your heart rate. We have in our midst um, a really good formula that was actually developed by a bunch of people, including myself, which is kind of the participation and the Canada Health Guide idea for SCI and people in wheelchair aging. And those physical guidelines really just stress 20 minutes a day, could be a walk out in the park. And when you walk out in the park, you might be also walking with a friend. So then you're going to get some of the mental exercise happening. And when you do that, you're doing what's called forest bathing or nature imprinting, which actually is really good, as they've proven in many ways, especially in the blue zones. That helps with stress management. And then you're going to make healthier diet and lifestyle choices, really overall. But you'll also be developing those healthier lifestyle and choices, hopefully, before you get to this kind of degenerative stage of what we will call aging. But yeah, daily lifestyle habits are really actually the most important thing for brain health. It doesn't mean that if you haven't started them now, you couldn't benefit from them, because it's actually a lot better to stop the progression of aging right in this moment than it is to try and fix progressive problems once they've already started developing. So the first quality of longevity that you want to achieve really involves your brain health. So what does brain health really mean? It's not just about memory, and it doesn't just involve that exercise we did earlier, remembering everybody's names, but that can be also really important. But it involves mental functioning, critical thinking, reasoning, being able to manage your emotions, as I said earlier, and just having the ability to have a steady countenance overall. So, from moment to moment, from different situations, uncertain situation in the world, terrible news, to, maybe a relative, having something happen, to maybe a child yelling at you the wrong way. What all those things are involving is your ability to reason and to be able to cognitively have the capacity to stay stable and make the right choice of what to say or what to do in that given situation. Let that car go by. So that's a really empowering thing for the brain, especially as it ages. Because what we do know about brain health is that as the brain ages, it naturally, just as the body does overall, develop inflammation. And inflammation develops for lots of different reasons. We could have a comorbid propensity, like diabetes or something. We could have a disability. We could have, any types of different diseases, which all contribute to inflammation. Now, there are things that can sort of slow down, if not really turn around, the progression of that inflammatory process in the brain, because it's really damaging to our brain. So inflammation is not good anywhere in the body. Of course, in the joints, it's more of a sort of precursor for arthritis. But in the brain, it's a precursor for Alzheimer's and dementia. And that's definitely brain research proven. So there are things that can help with inflammation too. And we'll get into those in the next slide or two. So lifestyle habits that you make. So as I said, brain health is more than emotional stability. Diet and lifestyle are the biggest factors, not only in brain health, but in your cognitive decline or health. So we want to think of prevention versus progression. And this is really just one little tidbit I'm going to drop in here because I don't want to overload you with a lot of data. Cortisol, which we all may be familiar with, which is produced when we go into fight or flight, is the number one degenerative factor in brain degeneration. So cortisol is released when we're stressed, when we're in a traumatic situation and we've got to kind of deal with it and we don't know what else to do. Cortisol can happen when you have an argument with someone. Cortisol can happen when you think about, something in the middle of the night that, causes you to stress out or worry about the next day. That cortisol dumping into the brain is very, 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 very destructive for the brain. So we want to develop ways to minimize, if not prevent, that cortisol download into the body. Easier said than done, but not impossible to counteract and or to create a holistic environment so that the cortisol dumping doesn't happen so often. So we're going to get into those things like what you see in those pictures. So the physical activity will help ameliorate the cortisol dumping. It'll boost your endorphins and it will stabilize your blood sugar and also your moods, essentially through that stabilization. We know that exercise produces the proteins that we want to have in our brain. It also helps the brain cells to develop branches on the ends of the axiom, which are called telomeres. And the telomeres are really, really important because those are the little fine little hairy things that are at the end of the axioms and the dendrite that actually grow more brain cells. So in things like degenerative diseases, the telomeres start to shrink and they actually disappear, especially in things like Alzheimer's and dementia. So those telomeres are what make the electrical connections with the other dendrites and axioms. So that's why, and partially the reason why we start to lose our short-term memory, because we just can't access it as quickly as we used to. 20 minutes of daily activity. And the next thing you want to think about is using your physical activity time to also encourage mental activity and mental exercising. So this is kind of the second elixir, and this is really key. And it could mean just learning something new every day, like looking into a fact and going, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know this before. Or playing your little word game, or doing a puzzle, or having a stimulating conversation with someone when you go for a walk. Then you're not only doing number 1, number 2, and number 3 together, but you're also crossing off number 4, which will be the stress management one. I've got number 3 there. So mental exercise could also include things that you might not have thought of, which is actually a mental exercise, like painting. So you're actually stimulating your right and your left hemisphere there. You're having to think about something. You're letting your creative juices flow. You get that middle part of the brain, the corpus callosum, kind of talking to each hemisphere, which is super good for the brain health and your mental function overall. A little tidbit I threw out, I think the last time I did this, Duncan, with the other group, was that every university, that I know of, over 65 offers free courses, even for credit, for seniors. So you could probably find a course to take. You could do any kind of thing, learn a new language, maybe take up an instrument. I don't know, but think about that as something. And playing games, so that you get now, the stimulus of like Mojang game with the conversation that's going around the table. Super good for brain health. And super good for stress management, because a big part of stress management is social interaction, and being able to have that, Maslow's theory of belonging, all of the different things that create connection, that create support in terms of stress management, are also really important. But stress management, ideally and most importantly, for us, thinking about brain health and anti-aging techniques, is the elimination of the inflammation that's caused by stress, which is caused, again, by some of the hormones, especially cortisol, adrenaline, and other things that kind of get in the way of that wonderful functioning. I'm going to do a little stop there and see if there's any questions or comments, or do you want to know more about one of the slides that we just passed?
I can throw a few comments in
Sure. Yeah.
just around the whole mental exercise. I do things that are very non-physical, but I play Scrabble
Oh,
online with friends, which it works my brain,
yeah.
keeps me going, and I have once a week I play against a friend of mine in Edmonton.
Yeah.
He usually beats me, but it's a good hour and a half. And then there's also, I don't know if you'll like this or not, but there are some games that are kids' games necessarily, but
Yeah,
they work your brain.
they do.
I work with my kids, and they have this game called Sherlock, and it's totally memory. They put 8 cards out with pictures on them, and you have to remember them all. They flip them all over, and then you have to choose which one you know. And then once you get a certain number, you get one, and once you get five, you win, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you can find stuff to do all over the place,
Yeah.
is my point. Not necessarily that you have to play Sherlock or Scrabble, just you can find stuff to do all over the
Yeah.
place. And
Yeah.
I'll say Pete's got his hand up. Pete.
Yeah, Pete.
My question, Mary-Jo, is around sleep, and I know that that's a really important one. And I pay attention to a lot of what you're talking about. Like I kind of know some of the background. I really appreciate the depth to which you're taking it in involving the science and so on. But I struggle getting a good night's sleep, and I've looked into it, and so I that's the area of my health that concerns me the most. So I don't know if you
Mm.
have thoughts about that, but love to hear them if you do, if you have any.
Yeah. Such a good point, Peter. I mean, sleep, as you know, is bad. It actually incorporates all four of these first physical aspects of brain health. Because if without a good sleep, we simply can't do any of these other things very well, as you know. I do have a couple ideas around sleep. First of all, it's really making sure that the environment prior to sleep and during sleep is really conducive to sleep. And I'm sure you know about this, Peter, but I'll just say it again. It's worth repeating. Ideally, you don't have screen time, ideally an hour to 2 hours before you go to sleep. That blue light and that activity is very, very different type of activity for the brain, and it actually is stimulating, and you don't need it. Make sure you put your devices into airplane mode once you turn them off 2 hours before you go to sleep, because even airplane mode, they've done a couple great studies now. The one that I love the most is with a bunch of kids, and it was a science experiment in there. You know how they have science experiments in junior high, and these three kids, I think it was three girls, they decided that they would test their, phones, because their moms were telling them not to put it next to your head. And so they wanted to see how these little alfalfa sprouts grew with the phone on, not in airplane mode, and how they grew in a setting where the airplane mode was turned off and the phone was not on Wi-Fi. Um, Totally different outcomes. So of course, the ones that were with the phone on and not in airplane mode and Wi-Fi is going all night long, they didn't grow. They actually grew a little bit at first and then they died. And then over on the other tray where they weren't being exposed to any of that blue light, not even neon lights, they were just in the natural window. They grew like robustly, like way tall. So that actually got documented because the teacher was so impressed with the study. So I think turning off devices is a really good idea. The second thing around sleep is making sure that you have, um, you know, a good meal, before bed, but not too close to sleep time. Um, and I kind of try and do it a couple hours before. And then I might have a little bit of yogurt on my table before I go to sleep. But just keeping that away because your body, when it's digesting, is not going to go into rest, to sleep mode very well. It will do rest and digest in the parasympathetic mode, but you got to get into the parasympathetic mode first. And when I say the parasympathetic mode, when I mentioned the brain earlier and the two different sides, well, we also have two different, very distinctive nervous systems. We have the autonomic or the sympathetic nervous system, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And so the parasympathetic system is when we rest and digest. That's when we're totally not stressed. And the sympathetic nervous system is the one that keeps us on high alert. So working your way out of that particular modality, for those of us in wheelchairs, we're always in high alert. So my recommendation to most of my students and stuff and in these courses is to really do some mindfulness or some yoga or something before bed to switch that brain out of that kind of fight or flight, sympathetic mode over to parasympathetic as you're going into your sleep preparation. Once you've kind of landed on your bed, it's the best place to do that because most of us that live in wheelchairs are going to be in fight or flight when we're sitting up in a wheelchair. It's just part of the package. I don't ever go out of stress when I'm sitting upright in a chair. Once I'm down and I can relax completely, I can shift into that mode completely. But it's variegated if I am still upright. So I recommend, getting supine, or sorry, prone. Supine was right. And then doing a little bit of de-stressed management. Might be deep breathing. It might be listening to some singing bowls. It might be listening to, Mozart or whatever helps your brain to just go into not hypermodality management. I got to do this. I got to think about that. And then the last thing I would recommend, Peter, is that when and if you do wake up, so there's certain kind of cycles to our sleep, as you probably know if you've done some looking into this. If you're breathing properly and sleep apnea isn't an issue, you need to think about the kind of the modalities of the alpha, beta, theta waves of the brain, and you might look at a couple YouTube videos. And then I try and time my rolling over to one side or the other, or my, kind of shifting my position into one of those shifts when we shift from one of those modalities. Because our brain and our central nervous system, the cerebral spinal fluid actually is part of that whole process. And I don't know much about it other than I know for sure from the world of yoga, we need to really let that cycle move through its complete process. And then it will begin again after you wake up and roll, and you'll go through that kind of second wind, if you will, of sleep. And so I don't know if that's too complicated, but I think the first three things you could probably manage pretty well, right? Any questions around that stuff?
Much appreciated, Mary-Jo. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also a thing called yoga nidra. And you could look that up on YouTube too. And it's rather than putting you to sleep, it actually puts your brain into a non-cortisol dumping mode, so into parasympathetic. And then after that happens, you probably will go to sleep. Like I fall asleep every time I do yoga nidra. It's like a progressive relaxation thing. But at first you're quite conscious while you're doing it. So you're slowing down your breathing. You're kind of, touch pointing different zones in your body that help you to ground and kind of feel stable and safe. And then you go into this sort of wonderful de-stressing exercise, which I'll send you one, Peter. How about that?
Okay. Marnie's raised her hand.
And Marnie, hey Marnie.
Hello. If you start having these short-term memory problems, um, like, is it kind of like too late, or
No,
is there something
No.
you could do to,
not
yeah.
at all.
And the other
No.
thing was, I imagine puzzles are probably pretty good, right? For the
Oh
brain.
gosh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, and puzzles are great because they're just like what Duncan said. Scrabble is cognitive. It's kind of working that part of the brain, but also his hands and his body's getting involved. Anything that involves both hemispheres, where you're actually getting your cognitive functioning working, like in a puzzle, but you're also physically doing something, super good. So just keep doing that, Marnie. Yeah, yeah. So these are all areas, and this is actually number 4. And stress management kind of encompasses the prior 3 because of the fact that stress is really kind of the number one, honestly, destroyer of health in general. If you think of dis-ease, the word itself, if you say D-I-S and then ease, when we're not at ease, peaceful and at ease, we're usually stressed. And so doing your little stress, litmus test, often during the day is a really good idea. And if you are feeling stressed, stop, take a pause, let yourself just recapitulate, come back to your center, remember your body. You could say to yourself, my body breathes, my body has weight. I can manage, my system when I'm, cognitively aware. I can do these things. So I think just realizing that you're actually able to intervene in stress rather than thinking that stress has the power over you. I think that's really, really important. And kind of the same thing with time, Marnie. If you control time rather than letting time control you in this one, you got this. If you start doing these things now, you're already on the way to reducing that. And like Duncan said, simple things like Scrabble or whatever would be, what I would suggest. There's a great app called Luminosity, and it's a really good one and there's a free version where you can do all sorts of brain puzzles and brain challenges to develop the very things that we've been talking about, better brain health. So the next things that we're going to add to this list, which that's number 4, is 5 areas that are the areas where Duncan might not have had, his repertoire of understanding as kind of robust as mine, only because we've had different backgrounds. So my background in yoga and psychology and massage therapy kind of led me into the more physical aspects and energetic aspects of who I am. And I'll start off just by laying a bit of a spoiler alert. When I approach this, I think of everything as energy. So even our physical body, as you know, like we have protons and electrons. We have a positive and a negative charge to every cell in our body. Our heart is an electrical pump. Our brain is based on electricity and firing of electrical impulses. So our breath is non-physical. So there's a lot of non-physical things about this reality. And so when I say we need to be spiritual so that we age well, or have a spirituality kind of ideology, what I'm really saying is not religion. It's not about a dogma or a God or a belief system. No, it's about the fact that we're energy, and that as energetic beings, we need to manage that energy. We need to manage our physical as well as our non-physical energetic being. And so the non-physical parts of anti-aging are what I'm going to talk about now. And the first one actually falls into this great concept by the Japanese, because of course they were the ones that we first studied way back in the 70s around, happiness and longevity, because they were the ones that had the first blue zone, if you will. And the 10 things, I'm just going to mention a couple that they do daily, is when they wake up, they think of their purpose. Now, if you're Duncan, it's easy. I'm a dad, I got kids, I got to do this, I got a job, right? You're already thinking about that prior to probably waking up.
Yeah.
But some people, when they get to this stage in life, if they've retired and whatnot, they may not have the connection to their purpose anymore. Well, get one. Find something. Maybe it's volunteering. Maybe it's contributing to Wikipedia. Maybe it's taking that university course. Whatever it might be, your purpose is really important. It might be as simple as calling your kids, or writing something nice and putting it up on a blog. I'm not sure, but purpose doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be lofty. It just needs to be daily, according to the research on the Japanese population. And that purpose really relates to the next thing that the Japanese do, and this was part of what they thought developed social cohesion and stuff. And that is to think about, one thing that you can do every day that you could, kind of pass on. That's a good thing. That's a act of, kindness or a benevolent thing. And so thinking outside yourself creates this social cohesion, creates community, it creates belonging. And so we're going to get into a little bit more and unpack those in my last 10 minutes before we open it up to questions and stuff. So, energetic. Of course, I mentioned earlier the native traditions all recognize that there's this kind of, greater kind of aspect holding all this together. Who knows what that is, or who cares really, as long as it, brings the sun every day and, brings the mood every night. I'm okay with that. But there's a definite energetic quality to the universe. There's a order to the universe. There's an intelligence to the universe. And we're a part of that. We're simply a part of that. Like, we're not, these cells and this body all comes from that, and it'll all dust to dust, ash to ash, whatever, if I get cremated, it'll all go back to that. So the energetic piece is really key to thinking about aging well. And of course, the native traditions, really thought about that, and their creator spirit, this sense of, this overarching kind of entity gives people a sense of trust in the universe, and also the well-being of themselves within the universe. So I just feel like that's worth mentioning here before I get into a lot more of these pieces. Social cohesion, being able to have, really good interactive times with, people you love, maybe people you don't know that will become friends, sharing food, cooking, that type of thing. And then I've got, nature and gardening and stuff like that, because that also can be something that you do socially, but it's very important for your spiritual well-being. Because of our makeup, we need that. We thrive. So
Interesting. And Mary-Jo, I wanted to mention something.
yeah.
There is one slide you showed there that I've seen, not from your slides, but I've seen somebody do it, and I've heard about it before, hugging a tree.
Oh yeah. That's my
Yeah.
dad. That's my aged dad.
Yeah, but I've seen that done before, and
Cool.
I don't understand the principle, but I've seen people do it, especially on the bigger trees with the wider trunks.
Great question and great comment. Uh, there's a woman, Susan Samar, that just wrote a book. She's a researcher out of UBC Forestry, and it was called Talking with the Trees. I think it's been pretty much researched and documented unequivocally for the last couple decades now that nature actually has this incredible communication system where the tree, like if we just think of an aspen grove or an aspen forest, underground, those trees are communicating to each other. They're exchanging information about nutrients, about pathogens, about dangers, about whatever it might be. But they're also socially engaged with each other, and so nature is a great example of how we can be more cohesive socially, and using nature to not only to see that but also to feel that is what is happening when we hug a tree. So back, if we go way back to the blue zones, what those elders do every day is something in nature. I mentioned forest bathing, but we're picking up intelligence from those sentient beings as well, if you will. That's also been documented. And forest bathing is also a Japanese habit. The research on that doesn't even go as far as hugging a tree. It just says walk in a forest and you're going to get these endorphins. You're going to get this happening in your body. And this stress, precursor won't show up on the end of that walk and various other things. And ideally, and essentially what it's doing is giving the mind this place of rest where it can do that rest and restore function whilst still being in the world. So that would be how I would explain the hugging the tree thing. And it kind of grounds you too. And grounding is another way for us to feel, that sense of trust, I think, in our physicality, in the reality that we're in. So for all those reasons, I feel like it's a good thing. So before I end this presentation, the number 7 on this one, spiritual safety. When we are with groups, when we have a sense of belonging and a sense of trust in the the greater intelligence that's running these things, that's not political like some of the weird thing that's going on right now, we then have more faith in ourselves, faith in life. We may have more optimism, and we actually we develop more autonomy, especially when we have more faith and when we have a sense of connection to something greater. That this is kind of happening here, but for millennia, this has been going on this planet. And look at we're there's still good things that happen, and there's still positive stuff, and I can still age well. So I feel like the last thing I want to talk about is the spiritual diet, because I did talk about lifestyle and habits earlier in the first 4, which are more the physical things. I didn't mention some of the foods and things that we shouldn't necessarily be eating too much of, because I'm pretty sure you guys all know about that. But I will mention the spiritual diet, which is essentially good air, good food, and good water, and a good mental diet of things that come into you. So, ideally eliminating negative thinking or, stress, encouraging, more fresh air, more outside time, eating the right foods. Look at the lettuce that I grew in the garden. Not only is that nourishing me physically, but spiritually, it's like I love growing food and I love seeing it grow, and then I love eating it. It's like, wow, there's something that happens in here with that. And then good water. I mean, we're darn lucky if we're in Vancouver. We have great water here. But I'll also say that water is also, it's kind of a great leveler and de-stressor. So sometimes for me, if I'm feeling stressed, I'll go run the hot water, let it run over my hands and wash away that stress or whatever. Metaphorically, it works. I don't know how or why, but like hugging the tree, it works. Sometimes if I drink water, I'll just say if I'm in an anxious spot, my body's safe, my body's breathing, my body's comfortable. So giving the mind a different kind of a tagline, if you will. So in the Eastern traditions, this is called mantra. In some of the religious stuff that I'm not ascribing to, they might call that prayer. But for me, I call it my positive mental talk. I really work at, eliminating negative thinking, eliminating self-critic talk. We all have that. And unfortunately, it kind of came along as the baggage that we have as humans, but it's not necessary to have it own you. You can reshape that. Just like we can reshape our brain to a certain degree. And I think I'll end on that note, because we can do a lot with reshaping our aging process with these
Should we
nine.
just go, should we go to questions and comments?
Yeah, good idea.
I have one comment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Something I do sometimes to help me is I do deep breathing exercises.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so useful and so beneficial on so many levels. How do you feel before and then after?
Well, sometimes I like if I'm, how would you say, not feeling good or sluggish or something, I'll try to take like, work it up and take a deep breath, hold it in for a while,
Yeah,
then try to get out as much as I can, getting rid of some of that stale air that's
yeah,
still in my lungs. And I
yeah.
like to repeat that a few times. And then after that, I start to feel better again. That seems to help me relieve some of the so-called stress and pressure.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, perfect. I
I have
love
a
that.
question, Mary Jo. When
Yeah,
you were talking about screen time before you go to bed,
yeah.
do you make a distinction between blue screen and TV?
Ah, that's a great question, Duncan. So
'Cause blue
I don't
screen would
have,
be phones, computers,
yeah,
blah blah blah, whereas
yeah,
TV is a different entity.
it really is. I mean, it's still digital, it's still stimulating, usually. I'd say it might not be as important to eliminate that, but I would say an hour before sleeping. All the research I've read, it says an hour for that, only because of the stimulation. I think um, you might not be getting Wi-Fi, kind of electromagnetic stuff, but you might be. I don't know your setup, but
Yeah.
if your TV's too close, you would be.
Yeah.
And I think in the research they include that. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. That's
Yeah.
all. Anybody else?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, go Lynn.
This has been a great presentation. I really liked it. A lot of it felt like fairly familiar, like things that I already have in my life. But the thing I realized is the purpose. Like it's so hard
Mm.
to just feel I still have a sense of purpose when my life is just about living for myself. Like I have a hard enough time taking care of my own body and mind. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I
Yeah.
live alone and I have to do everything for myself, which is good,
Yeah.
really. But I don't feel like I have any sense of purpose because that doesn't seem, I'm so used to having a big life, like doing
Mm.
lots of other things, and it doesn't seem like enough to be just taking care of myself.
Do you feel like you
Yeah.
have tons of time on your hands that you're not
Oh,
using?
yeah. Well, I fill my time. I read. I watch movies. I do lots of things.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just don't feel a sense of purpose in my life because I'm just living my own life
Yeah.
and taking care of myself. Maybe
So,
that's enough when you're 74. I don't know.
yeah, I'm actually gonna interject because I have a little sense of you because we've worked together. But I would say if you could think about your purpose as taking care of yourself to be the best you can be. That's the purpose actually of aging. It's that we will be able to give medicine, not take medicine. And so the wisdom that you have, Lynn, you already share it, and you already are thinking, you know, you've joined a board, you go here and there, and who you bring to each of those various interactions in your community is actually very purposeful. I really feel that, and maybe it's just recontextualizing for yourself that although the purpose isn't the social kind of, you know, Protestant work ethic kind of ideology that you go out and produce something every day, maybe the purpose is now more, you know, inner, maybe the inner life and the inner journey of you kind of really taking this next, you know, 15 to 20 years or so, whatever, maybe more, as your purpose, as how can I live the best life and live out my life in the best way possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm
Yeah.
curious,
Uh-huh.
Mary-Jo, as to the part that reading plays in all of this.
Oh.
I love to read, and before I go to sleep at night, I read for at least an hour. And I volunteer for a group called One-to-One Literacy.
Oh, I love that.
And
Oh,
it is such I feel like I have a purpose in doing that because I work with kids who are first, second grade and they've been identified by the greater group of one-to-one literacy, and then they come to us. I go as a virtual tutor because I'm in a chair and I basically can't go to the school, but I do it on Zoom, and it is wonderful.
Wow.
I really love it.
So that's a great example, Sydney, and she's also a great example, folks, of all of what I've just said prior, because she incorporates those 9 elixirs, I think, all the time. And at 80 plus, you're the image of aging well, and really. Really appreciate your comments. So just to say, reading books counts. It's very important and really good. And it's amazing that you can do a whole hour before you go to sleep. It's perfect.
Oh.
And the reason being, it's both left and right brain activity. It's not digital, and reading has got all sorts of other great benefits that, you know, I won't even get into here because you guys probably know all of them. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mary-Jo.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
You can learn a lot from reading also,
Oh,
and even
Yeah.
fictional books.
Yeah.
Pete's got his hand up again.
Yeah. And don't forget, there's the audio books for those of us that can't turn pages late at night, which is just as good.
yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I went through a course of mindfulness with Dr. Mock, and it was quite informative. That was in the pain clinic at Surrey Memorial Hospital, and that helped a bit.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good, good. Mary-Jo, I want
Yeah.
to thank you very, very much for your approach and for what you've told us today. I think everybody appreciates it. Thank you very, very much. And just keep doing things. That's basically, you know, what Mary-Jo is trying to tell you, what I've told you for many years. We tell it in a different way, but just keep doing things. Keep your head going, keep your brain going, keep your body going as much as you can.
That sums it up.